Good evening, good evening to all those who are now joining. Good evening, good night, good morning, good afternoon to whichever part of the world or this globe you are at. Islam to you, my Moorish brothers and sisters, my Aboriginal, Indigenous brothers and sisters. Islam, Islam, Islam to you. Peace, and I hope that you receive this message in good health and in good strength. Uh, I want to talk upon a topic that needs to be spoken upon, and it is the topic is democracy. How did it came to be, and what is democracy, and what derived from democracy? Democracy became a pillar in which the enslaved system can capitalize on. So that's why there's the meaning of the capitalist system, which falls under the democratic political way of life. Don't let us get fooled by it. There is democracy, there is socialism, there is a dictatorship, there is communism. All of these things that I'm talking about fall under a political rulership. Now I'm going to start from the scratch, and this is without the normal etymology meaning of it. It's more or less than giving you a preface of my comprehension of what is democracy. It's a combined knowledge of what I've read so far and what I've gathered. So I decided to talk to you with this manner of what a democracy is and the role of a democracy. But democracy doesn't even stop at all these things that I'm talking about. It must thrive on a political system. And I must break it up now and then. The etymology of political, poly, means more. It's a Latin word. Poly means more. Six means blood sucker. So if you comprehend what I'm talking about, I'm breaking it down to you in syllables so you can help to comprehend or understand or understand what I'm saying. I like to use the word comprehend. It's a more better word. It helps me to help you to acknowledge what I'm saying, get your brain working. What has happened with this democracy and why it was created? Why did the political system was created under democracy? Over the years, you had the conquest of Africanus, which renamed the continent of Ethiopia, or Kush, or Kemet, after his name, Africa. You had the Spanish conquest. You had all these people who were fighting the Moors for different sections or parts of the landscape. They were not only fighting for that, they were fighting for who can control the information because they realized the Moors were so educated that educated or edified. That's the most powerful tool. They realized that the process of edification that the Moors possessed was the most powerful weapon of them all. And they knew that they had to conquer these people in order to control their territory, to control their land, and it was a constant battle. All over the globe, the Moors were under attack. If some of you would have read or look it up on YouTube or Google it, who were the Moors and what were their representation under? And it was a faction of theories that they were coming up. They once called this they once called it the Ottoman Empire. But there was a more. And because we were Basque people, they tried to find names for us that could more or less suit their ideology. So what had happened after the Europeans, as a matter of fact, after the Spanish tried to conquer the entire South, Central, and North America, that entire place was known as Colombia. Certain parts of South America, the entire Central America, and certain parts of North America, into Texas, into Mexico, going all the way up to Canada. That entire place was Colombia. And the Spanish had their conquest. They wanted to rule the place. They tried their best to destroy the history. To me, I think they were more brutal than the Spanish conquest. I think was more brutal than the Romans. The Romans did a lot of things that were brutal, but they were more or less mind controllable. They they will kill your leaders in front of you and assassinate them and try fearing you without them pouncing on you. But the Spanish were different. The Spanish, they didn't only kill your leaders, they wiped out a generation of indigenous people, millions of them. And I'm talking about millions of them. So they wanted to implement their system. There was a rush for implementation of their own system. Let's hold a minute, please. Yes. There was a rush for an implementation of system. And whilst the Europeans were conquering and renaming the continent of Ethiopia or Ethiopia. And why do I say Ethiopia? You would realize that that was the only country on the African continent that was not colonialized, were not conquered, or how should I put it? They had a foreign rulership. So it wasn't colonialized. And that's why Ethiopia is a combination of Bantu people that were living there, because that's the area in which they were pushed to. So what had happened is that this greed, this conquest for greed was so entwined into the DNA system that it's heartbreaking to see what took place. So after the Moors realized that, hey, these people are not giving up. They're killing them out brutally, brutally, killing, killing them out, creating a genocide. In Spanish, we like that they couldn't wipe out the educated system, the edified or educated system of the Moors because they told the truth. You couldn't erase that. So they came to an agreement. The Spanish, the British, the French, the Dutch, all of them came to an agreement which a treaty was signed. China came to that agreement too. We come to China just now. All these world powers came to such an agreement under the British Crown. As a matter of fact, under the British Crown emulated certain factions in society that we call corporations now, like China, certain places like what's called Russia. Well, not Russia really, but Russia, yeah, and the entire European Union, some of the Arabic countries. And in 1777 became the, as a matter of fact, in 1701, in 1695 and 1701, the Moors were drafting a contract of what you call, I think I have a heat up, was drafting a contract of what you call a treaty. Under that treaty, they would have entered into an economic business contract. And under that economic business contract, that treaty would have been drafted in such a way to give, because since you can't own the land, there's no way you can own the land. In order to own the land, you have to wipe out an entire generation of people. You have to clear them out. That's a huge genocide. They tried it. They were trying it everywhere they, but they couldn't have. That's why on to this day they still have problems with the ethnic group of people which are called indigenous. They still have problems with them. That's the Moors. Everywhere they go, they have problems. You go in Australia, you find the same problem. So what they did, they contracted other elements, and those elements would have been one of the main ones rising behind this, which was the church. Then they call it the cross or the cloth. It wasn't known as the church then, it was known as the cross or the cloth, man of the cloth, or men of the cloth. Sorry. Right? And this treaty was so designed in such a way that we, as a people, as an edified indigenous people, were supposed to be given what you call royalty. Royalty is a payment to the use of our territory so that you can form an economic base. And then in that economic base, you can have your slaves. You can have those that you are considered commoners, or those you can consider subjects. Under the word slave, you realize that those two words exist. And under the word slave, the comprehension of the word citizenry exists also too. As long as you're a citizen, you belong to a company or corporation. You're a citizen. You enslave to the system because that's what it really means. Let me show you what's happening. So when the treaty was signed, it was also covered under peace, friendship, and an immunity of travel. That means to say that you cannot obstruct them. The Moors do not work for you. Our offspring, our people do not work for you. They're not enslaved to you. There can never be any emancipation. So you cannot claim them. You can claim who you capture and who confine themselves to you. But you cannot claim the edified indigenous aboriginals of the land. You cannot put any claim to that. So that treaty was signed. One came out in 1778, in 1777, but it was agreed to in 1778. And what happened every 50 years, you had treaties that were signed because you realize every 50 years, maybe another new Moorish individual who would come together with others and decide to sign another treaty because they realize that. But under the cloth that they would sign those treaties, so would have advanced their what you call their understanding and maybe want to override certain clauses. So they would have strengthened those clauses by taking other treaties. The last treaty that I've known about was in 1845, because after 1845, the church had a Nicene council, and that council really was to rule the entire world, was to not only put people under their captivity, but was trying to erase the culture of a people, which we will say the history of a people. And what happened after that was explosive. It was terrible. I'm going to show you an example. Slavery existed in such a large scale that when that treaty was signed, it's that it was appalling to know that this existed and some people didn't know something, some knew about it. I'm giving you honest with you. Some of us know about the level of slavery that was taking place in the West, but the 13 states up north didn't know a thing, although they had Moors who were free and independent and was acting upon the treaty. They weren't slavery there. Way down south. That's why when you check the U.S. history of slavery, more or less took place in the south and not the north, because the north was commercial, it was business as usual. They thrived upon it. So let's get down to this political life, this political way of things that they so got us bottled up into that I want to talk about on the show. So they introduced politics. And this is how it was introduced. You had the slavery. you had discussions of not allowing it to happen so broadly in the sight of others who may look like me. It's like, I know that I'm free. I'm not enslaved to a system. But when I look in the South, I see my brothers and sisters with shackles, and I would get mad because I would say, they look just like me, and why should they be subject to such chattel slavery, such a hard punishment? So they realize rebellions will happen somewhere along the line. And to those who are looking, you would have known that there was a very rebellious attitude with the Moors against slavery. That's why civil wars were fought and was enacted upon because of the same slavery. That's why the Arabs and the Caribs had this problem throughout the Americas. We had that particular problem because we knew that we were the keepers of our lineage, of our ancestors, the information. So it's impossible for people to just come to enslave us. So we started fighting back. And what the enslavers did is put some of our brothers and sisters to fight against. That's what took place. So that is why this treaty came about with the success of the truth, of knowing what was happening. And then we decided to sit down and sign these treaties. Helping one to know that we are the rulers of all the land. We are the masters of all these surveys and rulers thereof. So the lands that we're now signing as a treaty for you to come and invest, not to own, belongs to us. As long as we keep our names and we keep our ancestral history, you cannot claim them. So what they did, they started working on the slaves because they realized that to get the slaves to integrate with us, our story will erase gradually because the slaves will come with a disease that you call fear. And fear is where capitalism was born out of that disease. To capitalize on your fear, to rule over you because of your fear, of your fear. What had happened after slavery began to be abolished somewhat? They were afraid that these same slaves would rise up against them. So what they did? Those from the north decided to create a political system because they were looking at the island of Hispaniola, which is now Haiti, the Dominican Republic, that gained their independence by themselves without even asking. They were looking at all of that, and they didn't want that to shift down. So what they did, they decided to agree to the abolition of slavery, to abolish it, and the wisest ones agreed to what you call a political system that created an emancipation. And let me tell you what is an emancipation. They go to the slave owners and say, look, we got to abolish slavery because these people are outnumbering us. Even if we're fighting a civil war, we still can't win that war because they are outnumbering us greatly. So it is best we come up with a strategy to create an emancipation or to create an, an emancipated agreement with the slave owners and us. So you created a political system, and we say to you, to the slaves, look, we have abolished slavery. You are now free. And this process is what you call an emancipation, because the slaves couldn't read and write. That was a restriction. That was against the law. So what happened in this process? And to those who try to comprehend what I'm talking about, to emancipate means to transfer. Transfer a property. I'm going to show you. This is a deed, right? So a property. And I want to give my son this deed of the property. And I say, well, look, son, I'm no longer the owner of this property. But this is the deed for it. So I am transferring this property to you. And I add your name to it as now the owner. That process is what you call an emancipation. That's the meaning, the etymology, the creation of the word, the etymology of the word to emancipate. I hand it over to you. And in that process, my son will have to pay me reparations for that duty done, that emancipated duty. Because remember, I used to gain money off of this process, this deed, which gives me the right to the land. It was a commercial entity. I did commerce. I made money. And now I'm handing it over to my son with a comprehension of giving me back reparation for that process. Because for the money that I would have gained from now till when I die now, my son now takes it over. He now has to give me reparation. What is reparation? Show you a simple example. If you're working as a public servant and you meet the age of retirement, a servant means a slave. Mind you, you need to get that correct. You have listened to the word public servant, you're a public slave. So when I retire as a public servant, I will gain what you call a pension until I die. That's what you call a reparation. I'm no longer fit to continue the commerce, the action as a slave. So they give me reparation. And in that process, that reparation keeps me alive until when I die, which you call, many of us call it retirement benefit. Some of us call it, over here in this consortium or in the corporation of Guyana, they call it pension. So, if you keep holding on to reparation from emancipation, you'd realize that you cannot get the reparation because you were never the owner of yourself. It's someone who had owned your parents. Now, they have the deed for you, the child of your parents who was a slave. And that deed is an identification that they own you. What's your identity? You're a son of a slave or a daughter of a slave. So why do we have an identification? Point of question. Why do we have an identity? Ah, beautiful question, also. I'm going to show you why we have an identification. Now, because this process has happened, an emancipated process, where the slave owners hand you over from them to the corporation, which is the United States or Guyana. Remember, British Guyana was here. They were in control of slaves. They owned slaves. Now, they realize that the abolition of slavery, they cannot work on that anymore. So now they have to free the people. But that process cannot happen because they also know that to free the people is going to create mayhem in all their colonies. So they created what you call an emancipated process. You're now being freed from the ownership of the slavery. You're now being from the ownership of slave of those who enslave you into a system who would continue to enslave you. But that system is what you call a democracy. And that democracy would have now enlightened you that it's a group of people, nobles you call them, that falls under democracy. And that democracy would be a political system where they tell you that you're free, but you're not free. Let me show you why. Because now you have owners that will control the system that you have to work on. Remember, you were slaves. You don't know how to read and write. You don't know economics. You don't know this and you don't know that. So you have a group of people who will say, well, look, you're free people now. But in order for you to be civilized like us, we have to now run the system. It's the same people. But we have to now run the system in order for you to get some sort of benefit from the system. Because you don't know how to run a plantation. Only we do. So it is best left to us to run the plantation so you can be satisfied. We are accustomed, we have the experience. So the plantation is a democratic system. You don't have the experience we do. And the plantainers, the persons who runs the plantation are the rich and powerful. Because the slaves can't be rich and powerful. Only those who run the plantation are few. Are less than 1% that runs the plantation. The very few. So what happens after that? They created a system that you call a political voting system, where the now slaves, still slaves, will now vote. So who can better run the plantation, democratic plantation of democracy, that the other. So you find now all these CEOs or presidents, as you call them, will come up for election every 5 years, and they ask you to vote to them to see who better runs the plantation than the other. And they have big arguments: who's deaf, who can't see, who's blind, who's this, who's that. This democratic system replaces the royal system of kings and queens. Some kings and queens, like Great Britain, still remain heads of state, heads of companies, but gives permission to central executive officers that call themselves president, CEO, to make policies for better run the plantation without them have to take on, oh, I got to study but what to give the slaves next month or to give them new clothing. No. But if you're checking, everything depends upon the entities of the plantation. We call them corporations, which are the slaves. or subject. Everything depends upon you. The money that you work for, the plantation owners depend upon you working for it so they can remain rich. It's like you're still in a cotton field. You have to pay taxes. They're robbing you. Right there, like they don't pay taxes, but you gotta pay taxes. But you cannot rob them. See the difference? They're robbing you via of a system that they call taxes. It's legal for them to rob, but it is illegal for you to rob them because if you rob them, you're going against the law of the plantation and you will die. The police will come to you and you will die. They put you before a court system and the court system will say, hey, look, you're ignorant of the law, but Your Honor, I'm not ignorant. I voted for these people, but yes, you voted for them, but the Constitution that you voted for says that these people will be in charge of you. They're the crafters of your destiny. That's the law. So you can't go against the crafters of the destiny. So they have a court system to keep you in place, to keep you in check. And in that court system, supported by the police, to police you, the citizen. And to make sure that that system works, you have an army who defends the outer perimeter of the system you call the border, to make sure no other corporation comes to infringe upon the other corporation and try to enslave their people and their portion of their portions of treaty. So here we're looking at the same system, same slave system, but in a more developed manner. So to keep you enslaved now, we have to create strategies so you can like us. We got to give you sneakers. We got to give you clothing. We got to give you food. We got to make sure you don't work too hard. We're going to create machinery to plant your food and feed you. We're going to got scientists creating genetically modified products to feed, so you don't have to work hard. All you have to do is to keep on working for the money. And they have the pharmaceutical system, which is killing you out some more, and then they're telling you. You know the amazing thing? They got these commercials where they tell you to take these tablets unless recommended by the doctor. You have the choice. You still have to go to the doctor. The doctor recommends these tablets to you, but these tablets have serious side effects. It has liver failure, lung failure, heart failure, and can produce to death. And we say that's to go and buy it. We're legally going and buy this poison off the shelves to kill us. We are legally going to do it. That's why the people laugh at us now, because we need to say that we're free. We're independent. That's why they have that problem now with Kanye West. If you listen to him carefully, you realize he has awoken and know that he's a bourgeoisie. Yes, an uppity slave, bourgeoisie. And no matter how much money he got, can't get rid of the system he can speak about. Because he knows that his brothers and sisters in no way come. Now he's trying to awaken the minds of those who are still enslaved. And believe you me, they're still enslaved, you know. Let me come to the next part of the political system. So in order to own you, they have to create a stamp, a permanent stamp of ownership. You're no longer known as you see, those are everybody who uses the word indigenous in any country. The corporation or the country puts you on side. They don't want anything to do with you because they know that you know the truth and they know that you don't. They can make you to be a part of the system because you're going to corrupt the system. It's best you stay out than in. And they call you impoverished. What's the other word they like to use? Ah, brother, I gotta remember this word. Savage, because you refuse to identify yourself in a capitalist, colonialized, civilized system. They don't want you to be a part of civilization. They say that you don't want civilization, but what is civilization? Civilization is a military rule. That's civilization. It means you fall under military rule. You can't do anything for yourself. It's only the indigenous people are free. They can eat, sleep, live. They can do whatever they feel like because they're not part of the system. So I want to discuss this other part that I want to talk about. So they created now what you call a color of law to rule you over. So they look at you and they say you either be three things. You either be black, you either be Indian, or you either be African. Black, Indian, and African. Now, what is happening or happened over the years, and those are the three colors of law: black, Indian, African. Those are the three main colors of law. The minute you identify yourself as that person, you're under their jurisdiction. They can adjudicate, they can pass adjudication on you without your approval because they own you. You identify yourself as black. Why do I identify myself as black? On your ID card. You have an ID card, isn't it? You have a passport, isn't it? That passport is the property of the system. Everything you do is that via way of an ID card. Let me see your ID card. What are you? Oh, I'm Afro-Guyanese. Color of your eyes, brown. So they didn't ask the color of your skin. They asked for the color of your eyes, your height, and your identification as Afro-Guyanese. That's the color of law. So in the law book, you are a civilized slave. They own you. And you're confined to the acts, codes, conduct, and statutes of the law. They have to create laws so they can guide you properly into the present day slavery. You're not free. You have to live by laws. You're confined to the laws because you are owned by the state, the corporation. You're a corporate entity. You're a Guyanese. Makes your corporate entity they own you. And by that way, when you rebel, you break the law. Show you a simple example. Remember, Mr. Norton walked down Regent Street one afternoon and he was locked up by the police because they say he didn't apply to walk down Regent Street. And he said he wasn't, what was the word? Protesting. He was having a walk. They subsequently released it. And you ask yourself the question, well, why they lock up the opposition leader? They can. But the difference with him and you is that he's a bourgeois and you're not. Certain people have certain privileges. Certain slaves have certain privileges also too. But there are always laws that guide. There are always laws that guide. You can have billions of dollars. There is laws that guide you. You can evade the system how long you want. There got a day comes that the system holds on in you because you're still part of it. You're still part of the system. And the question was asked, but how can the system own you? The system do. Your birth certificate is you born as a Guyanese. That means you're born under ownership. And well, how can I born under ownership? Who gave me over? Your parents. They give you over to the system. Because when you were born, they went and signed up that certificate form, applying for a birth certificate from the Corporation of Guyanese. They're applying to the corporation. So the corporation can own their babies that were just born. So you're applying for ownership. And the corporation says, okay, well, your baby's now Guyanese, he's born wherever month, and so on and so forth, and that's it. Now the system tells you, well, we own your child until when the child makes 18 as an adult. And that child now can make his or her own decision. In that process, that child will be educated according to the system. So the child meets 80, whether she goes to university or not, and whatever. They still don't have a choice because the choice is to become a product of the system, live in the same system, and be a law-abiding. That means be a law-abiding state. You don't have a choice. You have to be law-abiding. So whatever we do to you, you cannot complain. You cannot rebel. You must not rebel. It's against the laws of the country. If you do well, then you become an enemy of the state. You put you before the court. You either jail you or take your life. You check everyone that uprises against the systems of any country, they die. Martin Luther King, he died. Malcolm X, he died. Marcus Garvey, he died. They were all living in the system. Noble Jew Ali, he didn't die. Prophet, Noble Jew Ali, he wasn't assassinated. He died, but he wasn't assassinated. Because they couldn't. He wasn't known as a U.S. citizen. He was known as an Aboriginal indigenous person that runs the Moorish High Science Center for indigenous persons, people who would live outside of the system. They're not a corporate state citizen. No, they weren't. They were never corporate state citizens. They were independent, indigenous Moors, like myself. So when these things were happening, one tends to look at different theories. There are different theories of political systems. Lots of them. It's how they change it. So the game of politics is who best play the game wins. That is why you have the same system in Guyana. It's who can best play the game win. The PDP or the AP and UAFC or all these people are not going to say to you that you are the slave, you are the subject, and it's who best play the political game win. The game has to be continued playing because you don't have a choice. You ever listen to your words that comes out of your mouth when the budget passed with 600 billion and you ain't getting no money out of it, you ain't talking so we can do by we can't fight the system. It is because you've been educated not to fight the system. To become the normal norms of society, for you not to fight the system. So what happens now? You live as you live under the direction of the system by bourgeoisie. You can imagine if everybody in Guyana decides to be indigenous and free. You ain't got nobody to rule. Who does you gonna rule? There are no slaves anymore in a plantation. You don't own them anymore. And people, when I say that they own you, they own you. Look what you work for. Money. Who owns the money that you work for? You know what the money says? Property of Bank of Guyana. It's the property of the Bank of Guyana. The money that you work for belongs to the system. It doesn't belong to you. That's why if the bank forecloses, let me see you got $10 million in the bank now, and the bank goes bankrupt because they can't afford to run anymore. You can talk cheese, you can't get 10. If there's anything over $10 million, you require for some percentages. They're making sure that when they take you money, a lot of you don't have more than $5 million savings. Some of you ain't got none. You barely got a couple $100,000, they still got $1 million short. But the banking will give you back nothing because you own nothing. The property that you own, it's a transport. That transport that you own, that you say, oh, this gives me the right over the land that I have. It's a transport. It's an emancipation process. To transport. Because anyone, and the laws of Guyana say that the government can take the land from you, although you pay for it. And they may reimburse you the money that you spent to develop it. But just so you don't own nothing. You can say it to court if you want, but the Constitution is there. It is designed for you not to own anything. The state owns you and everything you have thereof, your entire household. Yeah. As long as your children have birth certificates and ID cards, they own you. The entire family. You are their subject, their slave. That's what I said to you the other day. The smartest thing I've ever heard come out of Mr. Norton's mouth is that if there's no clean voters list, well, there'll be no election. Believe you me, that you must want 60 when you hear that. Because he knows very well that you cannot claim executive powers over a people that hasn't that didn't come and vote for you, that no opposition party contest the election. How can you claim? Only way you can claim is if you get negative and a positive side, or a ruling and an opposite side, where everybody participates in the same process of an electoral system by way of voting. So the slaves will join the line, stand up and vote for their masters to rule over them, to inflict oppression and slavery. Yes, they know that. They know that that's a probability and it must happen. You can talk whatever you feel like. That's the fact. Some people ask me, why did I change the virtue of the program in which it was running all the time? I spoke on democracy and I spoke on a few things because I didn't know. I'll be honest with you. I didn't know the truth. I thought I knew the truth. As I say again, I like reading, but there's certain persons that knows the facts that are available to teach you the facts that you don't know about. Believe you me, if you don't know a thing about. So what I'm doing now is leadership by example. I have built a movement, and that movement is running, where I teach high science, etymology, Aboriginal history, and artifacts. I do this because I want to edify my people. The minute you identify yourself as Black, Indian, or African, you can even add in a few things, colored or Negro. You're a product of the system. That's the color of law. If you look at it's to identify you. It is to keep you in check all the time. So you're running around and you're saying, but you know, these people treat Black people real bad. Identify yourself right there and then as a product of the system. And let us say you go before the court and you mention those same words, but Your Honor, these people be racist to these people, Black people. The judge looks at you and realizes you don't even have a clue what you're saying. And I always mention this case on my program in 2013 when these Amerindians took this particular coal mining company to court for mining on their land, their reserve, and they lost it. They even tried to appeal it, but they lost it still. Why did they lose? Because before the court, the judge keep asking them two questions. What do you identify yourself as? You cannot say Amerindian indigenous. Amerindian is one word, indigenous is another word. It is separated because Amerindian belongs to the system. The system created the word Amerindian to identify you, to draw the boundary of the corporation. You cannot be indigenous and be an Amerindian at the same time. They choose Amerindian. They lost the case. And they keep arguing the fact that they're Amerindian indigenous persons. And the court keep telling them you cannot be Amerindian and indigenous at the same time. You either choose one or to the two. Systematic words that are color of law you cannot use to describe